Today's audiobook is Mr. Gum and the Cherry Tree. Chapter 1, Spring Fever. Yes? No? Maybe? What? Hello. The whole squeak-mantling mess began on a day so innocent, a day so sweet and pure, a day so splendid, superb and magnificent, it could only be the first day of spring. Ah, spring. Or, as it's called in France, le boing. It is a brilliant season, definitely in the top 5. And what a fresh, special spring morning it was in the town of Le Monnet-Bibber. My friends, the sun was shining, the birds were playing Quidditch in the treetops, and the ground was sort of just laying there, letting people walk all over it. It was glorious, give me morious, start of the storious, sort of a spring morning, as you can imagine with your tiny little brains. Everyone was looking forward to it like a rascal. I'm looking forward to it like a rascal, said Jonathan Ripples, the fattest man in town. I think I'll celebrate it by eating not 1, not 2, but 8 hot cross buns. I'm looking forward to it like a rascal, said Martin Laundrette, who ran the laundrette. I think I'll celebrate it by spitting on not 1, not 2, but all 8 of Jonathan Ripple's hot cross buns. I'm looking forward to it like a rascal, said a little girl called Peter. I think I'll read my favourite children's book, Biffy the Worm Gets Arrested for accidentally murdering everyone in Carrada. It's unputdownable. But just as everyone was about to settle down into their beautiful spring mornings of eating, spitting and reading, a terrible shrieking was heard. It was old Granny, the oldest woman in Le Monnet-Bibber. She was running up the street and she was shrieking at the top of her voice. The old ways are back, cried old Granny as she hinged it up to the street, her petticoats all a-billow. The old ways are back. Oh dear, said Jonathan Ripples, shaking his big fat head big fat sadly. She's been at the sherry again. Lies, protested old Granny, taking a quick sip of sherry from the bottle she always kept hidden in her handbag. I never touched the stuff. But listen, the old ways are back, I tell you. Well, by now, quite a large crowd had gathered, and amongst them were 2 heroes you may know quite well. One was Friday O'Leary, a marvellous old fellow who knew the secrets of time and space. And the other was Polly, the happiest 9-year-old you could ever hope to meet. She was brave and true, like how do you do, and she had everything she needed in life. A face, a couple of elbows, and a pocket full of felt-tip pens, and hardly any of them had run out. The truth is a lemon meringue, shouted Friday O'Leary, as he sometimes liked to do. What's all this then? Shh, said Polly. Old Granny's about to speak. The townsfolk fell silent as old Granny regarded them with a mysterious gaze. Then she fell asleep. Then she woke up and regarded them with another mysterious gaze. Then she fell asleep again. Told you she was drunk, whispered Jonathan Ripples. Lies, cried old Granny, her eyes flying open into her most mysterious gaze yet. Now, here is my incredible news. The old ways have come back from before the days of science. Ancient spirits have awoken. Strange wisps and fancies are amongst us. 'Tis the truth, 'tis the truth, 'tis the truth, I tell you. Now come with me, and I will show you well. Ooh, went the little girl called Peter. Ah, went Jonathan Ripples. Chirp, went Crazy Barry Fungus, who thought he was a chaffinch. The old ways are back, cried the crowd, and they all set off after old Granny, chanting for all they were worth. What does you reckon, Frides? Said Polly. Shall we follow them? I think we'd better, replied Friday, stroking his toes thoughtfully. They all seem to have gone a bit mad, and that is what is called spring fever, or as it's known in France, les crazies de la brains de la bonne. Chapter 2. Off to the forest. Up at the top of Boaster's Hill, where the air is fresh and clean and is a lovely place to fly a kite, and the stars come out and twinkle at night. And I once saw a tramp there having a fight with a cat dressed up as the Queen. Yes, up at the top of Boasters Hill. A school lesson was taking place in the bright morning sunshine. And who was giving that lesson but Alan Taylor, the tiny gingerbread headmaster? So, as I have just demonstrated, children, he was saying now, grass is very nice to sit on, but be careful because it can tickle. Now, can anyone tell me the name of this handsome creature over here? Is it a rhino, sir? Said a girl called Caroline. Very close, Caroline, said Alan Taylor kindly. Actually, it's known as an ant. Now, who can tell me? But just then, there was an almighty ruckus and a rickus and a buckus and a bickus, as over the hill came the crowd of townsfolk with old Granny leading the way. And each and every one of those townsfolk, whether young or old, rich or poor, tall or short, thin or Jonathan Ripples, each and every one of them was chanting, "The old ways are back! The old ways are back! The old ways are back!" "Hi, what's going on?" demanded Alan Taylor as the crowd stampled through his lesson, scattering children and daisies in all directions. "What's the meaning of this?" "They're all done gone mad with the spring fevers, Alan Taylor," said Polly, rushing up with Friday O'Leary at her side. "They're following old Granny into adventures unknown." "Then we must follow them and keep them from harm," said Alan Taylor, "for they are but simple folk with simple legs, and who knows what peril those legs could be marching them into. Children, get in line, single file. Alan Taylor, you got the class so well behaved it's a marvel," said Polly, as the school children jumped into formation. "Yes," replied the gingerbread headmaster, blowing on his silver teaching whistle to start the children marching in time. "And when I think they used to be rowdy little goblins who love misbehaving and pinching each other, it makes me especially proud. I have tamed them," he proclaimed, "through the power of education and sometimes blowing a whistle." And so it went. Old Granny marched on, and the crowd of townsfolk marched behind her, and Polly and her friends marched behind them, and the school children marched beside them. Yes, there was certainly a lot of marching going on that morning, and actually it was even the month of March, so that counts as another one. Kind of. Onwards they marched. Over the fields and far away they marched. Up hills and down they marched. Over a glistening lake they marched. "How did we march over a lake?" asked Friday. But somehow they just did. It was that sort of day, until eventually the crowd disappeared into a thick clump of trees. "The truth is a lemon meringue," whispered Friday at the top of his voice. "Look, old Granny's leading them into the forest of runts, where the trees grow thick and plenty, and they say ancient spirits do dwell." "Well, there's no going back now," said Polly, and so Friday uttered the traditional words for entering the forests that were said in the part of the world. "Boo, boo, flappy, flappy, boo, boo, flappy, flappy," and they entered the forest of runts. "Ooh," said the school children, "it's scary in here." "That's because of the ancient spirits," whispered Friday. "This place is full of them, enormous phantoms as small as your finger, and a phone that rings, and when you answer, it's ghosts, and a witch who lives in a pine cone, and—" Alan Taylor blew his whistle, teaching whistle sharply. "Settle down, children," he said. "And enough of your tall tales, Friday. It's only a forest." But even so, it was a pretty spooky place. The only sounds were the rustling of the leaves and the soft sighing of the wind. The glooming trees covered all around, making Polly shiver and Friday's hat whimper in fear. And the school children clutched at each other, half in terror and half in glee, as they remembered Friday's stories of ancient spirits and townsfolk. Deeper they went into the forest, listening to the sounds of the forest. Whoosh, swish, Sounds. The woodpecker pecked and the woodpeckers didn't. A ladybird sang a mournful song on her guitar. A dandelion chased a dandy zebra through the undergrowth, and the path before them twisted and turned through the haunting trees like some sort of big curly super finger, beckoning them on. At last they rounded a bend and came to an archway formed by two low branches all covered in roses. And beneath those curving branches stood old Granny and her crowd, as solemn as calculators. "Here we are," whispered old Granny, and the leaves and trees seemed to whisper back, "Here we are, here we are, here we are." "Our journey is at an end," she whispered, and the leaves and trees seemed to whisper it back, "At an end, at an end, at an end." "My leg hurts," complained Martin Laundrette, and the leaves and trees whispered it back, "Stop complaining, stop complaining, stop complaining. Nobody cares about your stupid leg. You crybaby, crybaby, crybaby." "This is where it all happened," said old Granny. "Once the leaves and trees had shut up, this is where I heard him." "Heard who?" asked the little girl called Peter. But old Granny had already ducked through the flowery archway. "Follow me," she cried. "Follow me and see for yourselves." Who went through the arch? Here's who went through the arch that morning. First was old Granny, then Martin Laundrette, then the little girl called Peter, a little boy called Rita, and a baby called Elsie Wawa, then a really tall bloke called Harry Extremeleg, then Thora Gruntwinkle with Greasy Ian and their pet monkey Philip the Horror, and then Jonathan Ripples, who got stuck in the archway and had to quickly go on a diet for 10 minutes until he lost enough weight to squeeze through. Then came David Casserole, the town mayor, followed by Charlotte Casserole, his beautiful wife, and Frank Casserole, his beautiful husband. Next was Beanie McLeany wearing a bikini and reading a magazine. After him came Pamela, 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 and Pamela, or the Pamelas, as they were known for short. Then came another Pamela, who didn't count with the other Pamelas because none of them liked her. Then came a superhero called the Yellow Wriggler, who caught the criminals by crawling under the ground, dressed as a banana and shouting at them. After him came an illusionist called the Prince of Illusions, and after him came the Prince of Illusions again. "Ha ha," said the Prince of Illusions. "The first time I went through the arch, it was just an illusion." Then came a few other people I can't be bothered to tell you about. Then a couple more and then a couple more, and after they came the heroes, Polly, Friday and Alan Taylor, along with his class of giggly schoolchildren. And finally came crazy Barry Fungus, hopping along in his silver birdcage and tweeting like a chaffinch. "Tweet, tweet," said Barry Fungus. "Tweet, tweet, wait for me, wait for me." Chapter 4. Who didn't go through the arch? Everyone else in the world, and also the Prince of Illusions. "Ha ha," said the Prince of Illusions. "The second time I went through the arch, it was just another illusion. I haven't gone through the arch, and I never will. Goodbye." Chapter 5. The Voice in the Tree. "Ooh," said everyone as they stepped through the arch. "This is nice." "See," said old Granny, pointing around the place and having a crafty sip of sherry while no one was looking. "Told you it'd be good." And it was. Old Granny had led the townsfolk to a forest clearing, which is like the rest of the forest, only not quite so stuffed with trees. "It's beautiful," said Jonathan Ripples. "It's wonderful," breathed the little girl called Peter. "Oh, what fair enchanted grove be this, where time hath stand still for many hundreds of years, and man hath seldom roamed," marvelled one of the Pamelas. Not Pamela or Pamela or Pamela, or Pamela or Pamela or Pamela or Pamela or Pamela, but Pamela. And indeed, The air did feel magical. It was easy to believe the old ways were still at work in that place. The grass waved softly in the breeze like the hair of a long-ago princess. A sparkling blue stream burbled and tinkled over moss-covered rocks as if to say, "If you get thirsty, I'll be there for you, with my sparkling water so wild and true. But if you would drink from me, here is my warning. A fish did a wee in this only this morning." An ancient stone statue of a goat stood crookedly in the grass, half grown over with ivy and hazelweed, and there was a bush, not just a bush, but a nice bush. But by far the biggest fatso in the clearing was the cherry tree. It was a shining, flaming phoenix amongst cherry trees. Its sturdy trunk reached proudly from the heavens. Its branches flung themselves far and wide, like a rejoicing priest who just discovered God hiding in his garage. And amongst its rich green leaves dangled hundreds of plump red cherries, fat and ripe and bursting with juicy secrets. Yes, old Granny told the memorized townsfolk, this is where it all happened. This is where I heard him. But even as she spoke, a strange voice suddenly rasped out of nowhere, shattering the day's calm like a rusty trampoline and shaking every single leaf in the place. "Well done, you stinky old woman," said the voice. "You'd lend 'em here, like I commanded." "It's him," cried old Granny, falling to her knees at the base of a tree and wrapping her arms around its trunk. "Oh, great one, I would do anything for you." And suddenly the townsfolk realised something amazing. "That voice is coming from the cherry tree itself," exclaimed Jonathan Ripples. "It's true," cried the little girl called Peter. "Exactly," said old Granny triumphantly. "That's what I've been saying all along. The old ways are back." "That's right," said the voice, and the leaves on the cherry tree rustled excitedly. "'Cause guess who I flippin' well am?" "Batman," said Friday. "No, you idiot," growled the voice, and the leaves and the branches of the cherry tree shook even more wildly. "Ha, ha, ha, ha! I am the mighty Runtus, king of the woodland spirits. I come back from them olden days, what's lost in the mists of all time. I come back to rule over you all." "Oh, great Runtus," cried the crowd, dropping to their knees on the sacred earth around that fabulous tree. "We have heard of you in a legend and rhyme. Tell us how we may serve you, oh great one." "Right," yelled the voice. "First up, I'm absolutely starving. You there, you big fat one, go and get me some snacks, Tubbs." "Yes, oh great Runtus," said Jonathan Ripples, almost falling over his own stomach in his haste. "And you stupid mare," said the voice, "give me them expensive shoes what you're wearing." "Yes, oh great Runtus," said David Casserole, pulling off his Italian loafers and flinging them into the tree. "And you, the little boy with the ugly face, go and find me a—" But Polly had had enough. "Holds on just 1 minute," she said, stepping into the centre of the clearing. "Townsfolk, are you really going to fall for this? I'll bet you all money in the world, plus some transfers what I get free with a comic. I'll bet you anything it's Mr. Gum up that tree." "Mr. Gum," murmured the crowd in dismay. "What, that old horror?" "Yes," said Polly. "Mr. Gum with his nasty old beard and his fierce old eyes, and his hat what hardly even fits to his pointy old head." "Shut up, you meddling little girl," shouted the voice in the tree. "I'm definitely Runtus, and what's more, I can prove it. Oi, Bill, get out here, me old pal from the olden days." And then there came a rustling in the bushes, and the crowd gasped as out popped something they had never seen, but had only heard about in the legends of old. It was an amazing beast with the head of a man and the body of a stinking great horse. "Nay," he said the strange creature. "Nay, me name's Galloping Bill, and I'm a flippin' centaur from the olden days. Nay, 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 nay." "Oi, Galloping Bill," said the voice in the tree. "Stop your neighing and get on with it, or I'll kick your blimmin' tail off." "Oh yeah, Sorry, Runters, said Galloping Bill. Now listen up, you lot, he told the astonished townfolk. Back in them olden days when Runters ruled, it was brilliant. Everyone just lazed around eating cherries all day. Then there wasn't no work, there wasn't no school, there wasn't nothing boring at all. It was just cherries and lazy, I tell you. Hooray, said the crowd. And now you looks in, continued the amazing centaur, 'cause Runtus is back to make them olden days happen again. Hooray, said the crowd. See you later, said Galloping Bill. Nay, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Moo, roar, nay. And with that he disappeared into the bushes. Hooray, said the crowd, who by this point were just hurraying any old thing. Right, said the voice in the tree. You heard what old Who Features said. Now get down on your knees and tell me who's boss. Runtus, said the crowd, falling to their hands and knees. What's that? I can't hear you. Runtus, chanted the crowd. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. Friday, what's we going to do? Said Polly. The whole town's fallen for it. But Friday O'Leary paid no attention. He was down on his knees with the rest of them, chanting for all he was worth. Oh, Frides, you've been tricked as well, said Polly sadly. And you're usually so sensible. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. The chant grew and grew, like a bad seed that fell into the ground and became an angry sunflower with a gun. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. It drowned out the birdsong. It drowned out the tinkling of the stream. It drowned out everything. I said it drowned out everything. Oh no, said Polly. Them school children is at it too. Blow your teaching whistle, Alan Taylor. Blow it like a Roman emperor. So Alan Taylor blew his teaching whistle, but of course the chanting drowned it out. And even if they'd heard it, the children wouldn't have cared. They're turning wild, sobbed Alan Taylor. I hardly know them any more. Come on, A.T. There's nothing we can do 'bout it now, said Polly. We'd better scapes before we goes insane. And so Polly and Alan Taylor left that place, and no one even bothered to say goodbye, for the folk of Lamonic Bibber were lost to the chants and the wild ways of the wood. Chapter 6. Alan Taylor Gets the Pets. Whoa, 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 and a bottle of glum, said Alan Taylor, as he and Polly trudged forlornly through the forest, the ground squelching beneath their feet. I've lost all my school children. I must be the worst headmaster in the world. Don't you be talking no nonsense, you tasty little superstar, said Polly sympathetically. It's not your fault they all turned off like that. Oh, but it is, wailed Alan Taylor, throwing himself to the forest floor and pounding the earth with his little brown fist. I'm a useless teacher. I can't do anything right. Even that last sentence has got a spelling mistake in it. I'm completely hopeless. Well, what about this little twinkler? Said Polly, pointing to a fuzzy blue caterpillar that was busy licking Alan Taylor's foot. He don't think you're hopeless. He seems to be taking a shine to you. Do you think so? Sniffed Alan Taylor, blowing his nose on a passing stag. Do you think I can make him my pet? I don't think you got any choice, laughed Polly. He's well in love with you. Well then, sniffed Alan Taylor, I shall call him Graham the caterpillar. So Polly found some lead for Graham, and Alan Taylor cheered up, and he looked around, and he looked ever so chirpy, walking along with his brand new pet. Where are you going, A.T.? said Polly as they continued on their way. We need to find shelter, replied Alan Taylor. That's the important thing. Then we can. But at that moment he happened to glance down, only to see that Graham the caterpillar was holding on to a tiny little lead of his own. At the other end of the lead was a ladybird called Johnny Two Spots. Why, the little rascal laughed Alan Taylor. Look, Polly, Graham's found himself a pet. And so they continued through the forest until they came to a sort of hollow ground. What about here for shelter? Said Polly, but Alan Taylor shook his head. No, he said, take a closer look. It's full of wolves. So on they went. Hey, A.T., Polly suddenly exclaimed. Johnny Two Spots the ladybird done got himself a pet too. It was an aphid called Penelope. Where will it all end? Laughed Polly, who had never seen such fun. I don't know, said Alan Taylor, skip-scappering along, his electric muscles sparking with delight. He was quite back to his usual cheerful self now, and suddenly the first cuckoo of spring jumped out from behind a hedge and went cuckoo, and the first daffodil of spring jumped out from behind another hedge and went daffodil, and the hedgehogs and the badgers popped up and danced around them 3 times in a ring and disappeared back into their undergrowth as quickly as they had arrived. And then the sun shone down through a gap in the trees, and a sparrow sailed past in a little flying bird bath, and the entire forest seemed to sparkle with a million sparkles, one for every single boy and girl in the whole world, even the naughty ones who don't really deserve a sparkle at all. Oh, perhaps the forest isn't such a bad place as we done thought, said Polly, sticking a beautiful wild flower known as a purple git in her hair. And with friends and pets and giggles me gee, we won't never lose the day. We'll stop that runtus madness, we will. I know it, Alan Taylor. I know it in my heart. Well spoken, fair 9-year-old maiden of the forest, cried Alan Taylor gallantly. Now let us away, for methinks shelter is near. Tally-ho, pets, tally-ho! The gingerbread pet master cracked the dental floss once, twice, 3 times, a lady, and rearing up to their full height, Graham the caterpillar, Johnny Two Spots, the ladybird, and the Penelope, the aphid, led them onwards, towards the next clearing, onwards towards shelter, onwards towards Chapter 7. Chapter 7. There is no Chapter 7. Chapter 8. A plan is born, and so are some pets. Okay, Polly, said Alan Taylor, once they were settled in the next clearing. We've sorted out shelter. Our next challenge is finding something to eat. We must forage for our food, like hunters, he continued, scrabbling around on the forest floor. Look, I've already found a dead bee, and if we're very lucky, he said hopefully, turning over a small rock. Yes, maggots! Now, our next task is to gather sticks to start a fire. And why don't we just go over there? Asked Polly, pointing to a nearby shop. Squirrel McWirrell's general store and delicacies, food, news, tobacco, acorns, etc. Oh yeah, said Alan Taylor. That's a much better idea. So, off they went to Squirrel McWirrell's shop. By the way, Squirrel McWirrell wasn't actually a squirrel. That would be crazy. He was a goldfish. 5 minutes later, the heroes were back, stuffing themselves on Cornish pasties, lemonade and sweets, and watching the pets as they capered. Johnny Two Spots was waltzing with the buttercup. Graham the caterpillar was sitting on a mushroom, pretending he was in Alice in Wonderland. And Penelope the aphid was phoning her mum, who lived in the next forest along. It was ever so joyful, and yet Polly's heart was heavy as Frankfurter. Oh, Alan Taylor, said Polly, I'm well worried about them townsfolk. If it is really Mr. Gum up in that cherry tree, then it can't be no good for no one. Well, that's where I'm 1 step ahead of you, winked Alan Taylor, taking 1 step ahead of her. Look what else I brought at Squirrel McWirrell's. A camera, said Polly. But why? Because we need to convince the townsfolk, said Alan Taylor. So if we can get up into that tree ourselves, then we can do a photograph of him and we'll have all the proof we need, finished Polly, Excellent plan, gingerbread man. So how do we? But just then, the pets came tumbling up. Hey, said Polly, look how fat they are grown, the little greedies. It was true. The little pets were no longer all that little. They were bulgers, one and all. Graham was as big as fat Chubster, Johnny was 2 spots could hardly even walk, and Penelope the aphid was absolutely enormous as well, for an aphid. And then, suddenly, poof! Dozens more pets popped out of them. It was beautiful, but also disgusting. Ooh, cried Polly. Alan Taylor, your pet's just done millions of babies all over the place. Yeah, remarkable, said Alan Taylor, examining the dozens of new caterpillars, ladybirds, and aphids crawling along the forest floor. Absolutely remarkable. Come on, Polly, we'd better tether them up. So Polly produced the dental floss from her pocket, and they spent a happy hour making leads for all the new pets. By the time they were finished, old Mr. Twilight was creeping through the forest, turning the day to evening with a flicker of his long goldy fingers. It was that magical hour when anything feels possible, and Polly felt a secret thrill of excitement. Maybe we were strong, she thought, as mysterious shadows stretched over the land. Maybe Runtus really done returned, after all. But there were no time for doubts. The plan was on. Right, said Alan Taylor as he fixed the last lead to a baby caterpillar called Brighton. It's time to look at that cherry tree. Chapter 9. The Dance of the Cherry Tree Goblins. Softly, 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 Polly and Alan Taylor crept through the forest. They left the pets behind, being babysat by a kindly old hare. Don't worry, I'll look after them. She hadn't told them, but you knew that's what she was thinking. So now, here they were, 2 heroes in the night, creeping towards their destiny and occasionally tripping over small twigs. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus! The horrible chanting grew louder as Polly and Alan Taylor neared the clearing, and as the last of the day's light flushed away down the toilet of time, Polly saw a scene that froze the marrow in her bones and turned her blood to ice, and turned her hands to snowballs, and turned her nose into a carrot. And stop turning into a snowman, Polly, whispered Alan Taylor. We've got important work to do. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. The heroes crept closer. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. The heroes crept closer still. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. The heroes crept closer than ever. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. Alan Taylor's head bashed into the cherry tree. Oops, too close, whispered Polly. The heroes crept back a bit. And there they hid at the edge of the clearing, taking it all in. It was ghastly. The townsfolk were kneeling in a big circle around the cherry tree, their arms covered with scratches, their hands tangled with leaves and dirt. Their clothes were tattered and torn, and crazy Barry Fungus's birdcage hadn't been cleared out all day and smelled so bad that he could hardly breathe. What a mess, whispered Polly. They look like they don't even know what they're up to. Runtus, 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 chanted the crowd. Runtus, 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 shut up, roared the voice from the cherry tree suddenly, and at once everyone felt silence. I've had enough of you for one day now. Get lost, and remember what I told you. Oh, yes, oh great Runtus, said the townsfolk. We've heard your commands. We know what we must do. Tell me again, said the voice. Tomorrow we must bring you precious gifts, chanted the townsfolk. We must each bring you the thing that is most precious to us in the whole world. That's right, rasped the voice, making the tree rustle from its roots to its leaves. Now, push off, the lot of you, and don't you forget them gifts tomorrow. We won't, Runtus, we won't, promised the townsfolk. Good night, Runtus, said the little girl called Peter. Shut up, snarled Runtus. Shabber me cherry-filled whiskers. What a bother this all is. So that's his game, whispered Polly. He just wants their riches and money and jewels. We should have known. The heroes watched as the townsfolk shambled out of the clearing. Runtus is the best, mumbled Jonathan Ripples. I can't wait to see him tomorrow. I'm going to give him my most precious gift, old Granny muttered to herself. Then he'll see how much I love him. The truth is a cherry tree man, chanted Friday as he headed off home. The truth is a cherry tree man. That's it, 80, said Polly, hot tears stinging her cheeks. I can't stand to see such shenanigans. We got to get into this tree right now. Patience, cautioned Alan Taylor. Let's wait until night's descended on the land like the devil's tablecloth. Soon, night descended on the land like a devil's tablecloth. That didn't take long, whispered Alan Taylor, putting on his cheerleader skirt. Now, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, let's investigate that tree. But all of a sudden the moon came out from behind a cloud, drenching the clearing in its ghostly silver light, and the wind blew as if in answer to the moon, throwing strange bumpy shadows everywhere. And now Polly and Alan Taylor could hear them crackling, cackling all around, creeping out into the bushes, rustling in the undergrowth, emerging from rabbit holes, peeking their dirty little faces out of the shrubs, one by one. We back, they cackled, and their voices were hard and sharp and cruel. We back. And oh no, whimpered Alan Taylor, his raisin eyes wide in the moonlight. It's the school children. Only we back, crackled the voices all around. Only they've gone wild again, he gulped. Polly, my school children have turned into goblins. We back, crackled the goblins. We back. Oh, they were back all right, with their teeth and their claws and their extra legs and their tails and the spikes and their horns. All the old faces were there. Oink Balloon, Captain Ankles, Livermonk Spowdog, Mr. Boomerang, Yak Triangle, Whippy, and everyone's favourite, Big Steve. The big fat goblin with the little red hat. And oh, there were plenty of little ones too, like this tall thin one with no head called Plouncer, and a grubby little belcher called Teenage Loaf, who had 13 arms and a head shaped like a radiator. It was horrible. Ha ha ha, laughed a voice in the cherry tree. That's right, go wild, me filthy army of the night. And the tree, it did rustle, and the tree, it did shake, and the earth, it did tremor, to see the woeful scene. Must do song, squealed Captain Ankles, and at his command the goblins began circling the cherry tree, whooping and weeping and trampling the soil beneath their grubby feet, and Galloping Bill rode out from the bushes, rampant and smelly and untamed, beneath the moonlight, his hooves beating furiously on the wind. Cover your ears, Alan Taylor, cried Polly. Cover your ears. They're about to do one of their dreadful songs. Chapter 10. The Cherry Tree Song. I come back from the old days to sing you all me song. Up this flippin' cherry tree, oh, that's where I belong. And I brilliant centaur, look at me amazing hoofs. Round this cherry tree I'll dance, and that the blimmin' truth. I want cherry tree, gimme loads of cherries. Me stuff them in me mouth and spit them stones out on Bill. Ow, ow, nay, you stupid little squirt. Stop spitting cherry stones on me, that one really hurt. Me want cherry too, spit the stones on Bill. Me want cherry too, ouch, 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 oof. Spit stones on Bill, spit stones on Bill, spit cherry stones on Bill, ill, ill. Spit stones on Bill, spit stones on Bill. Ha ha, we got him on the nose. Ha ha! Good work, me old goblin army. That's the way to do it. Now Livermonk, Teenage Loaf, burp duet. Hit it! Burp, 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 burp. And again, I come back from the olden days to sing you all my rhyme. Up this flippin' cherry tree, I'm singing all the time. Burp, burp, ouch! Cherries, cherries, ha 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 ha. Nay, ow, let's do it once again. I come back from the olden days to, oh, it's horrible, moaned Alan Taylor, desperately stuffing bits of grass into his ears. I knows, sobbed Polly, they're so out of tune it's unbelievable. I'm trying not to listen. But it just keep inviting itself into my head without knocking first. Round the tree, the goblins whipped, spitting the cherries and burping their burps and kicking each other in the shins, and Galloping Bill capered around with them, neighing and going, ow, quite a lot. We got no chance of getting into that with all them goblins a guarding it, said Polly. They'll mash us up like doorbells. But Alan Taylor had another plan. Do you see that massive tree, Polly? He said, pointing to a grand old Duke of Horse Chestnut tree, towering above the clearing as if 'twere reaching for the moon. Yeah, said Polly, it's a right old conker de la Splonker. Exactly, said Alan Taylor. Now, if we can get up that horse chestnut, we can shimmy along the branch, do you see, and we can drop into the cherry tree from above, and then we can take our photo and catch Mr. Gum in the act, and them goblins down on the ground won't know a thing, exclaimed Polly. Alan Taylor, you are the best. Chapter 11, An Old Friend Says Hello. Burp, burp, burp. Ow, stop spitting cherry stones at me. Ha ha, get him, goblins, pull his tail. Under cover of the hideous music, Polly and Alan Taylor inched towards the horse chestnut tree. There it stood in the moonlight, towering over the clearing, as it had done for hundreds of years, ever since it was just a tiny conker crying in its mother's arms. It's a gigantor, said Polly, gazing up at the huge, wild trunk before them. How we're even going to get up this old belly boiler, I'll never know. Just remember the 4 C's, said little Alan Taylor, climbing, courage, confidence, and calling an ambulance after you've fallen out of a horse chestnut tree and broken every single bone in your body. Well, the 4th C didn't really fill Polly with much of the 3rd C, but there was nothing else to be done, so gathering all her 2nd C, she threw her arms around the trunk and started doing the 1st C. Come on, Polly, you can do it, urged Alan Taylor, as he sat in her hair. Yes, that's it. Ooh, you nearly climbed half an inch. Keep going. It was no use. The trunk was too wide, too steep, too smooth, too slippery, 200 feet tall. I can't do it, said Polly. I can't do it, A.T. It's an impossible dream. There's just no way up, and now we'll never prove who's really in that cherry tree, and the game's lost, and the end of that, and I'll has to move to another town where no one knows what a failure I done made. And I'll open a little shop by the sea what's called Lonely Polly Seashells and Lollipops. And all them lollipops will have sad faces on, and taste bitter and dust, and hardly no one will ever come into my shop, and there I'll sit all day long, sighing, and looking out of the window over the rainy beach, looking out to the sea, thinking about a little place called Lemonnet Bibber, what I once did love. And with that, poor Polly slumped against the tree and began to sob. Alan Taylor offered his pinky, but it was the size of a postage stamp. Not enough for 1 teardrop or more. But lo, whatever that means, just when all seem lost, there can be a bark. Not a tree bark. There was already plenty of that. That was the problem. but a bark such as the noise what occasionally emerges out of the mouth of dogs. "Look up, Polly," cried Alan Taylor. His raisin eyes gleamed. And, yes, the astonishing truth was that an enormous Jupiter of a dog was bounding down the tree trunk towards them. A massive whopper of a dog, in fact. And what? No, really, seriously, yes, it was none other than the magnificent Beastalizer. "Jake!" shouted Polly, as the huge golden furhound flamped itself down the tree, barking it up like a chostrel and singing his old song. "Bark, bark, 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 woof." It was amazing, but true. Polly and Alan Taylor had stumbled across the one and only secret and legendary horse chestnut tree in which Jake, the dog, lived. "Oh, Jakey, Jakey," said Polly, throwing her arms around that good boy's back and hugging him till he dribbled. "So, this is where you calls home, and now you can take us up to your nest, and we can do our plan, and the wonderful townsfolk won't be fooled no more, and I won't have to live by the sea, being sad. Oh, you lovely, 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 lovely wolf dog." In that instant, the heroes had hopped onto Jake's broad back, and he was zipping up the tree trunk like he didn't even care. His famous claws dug into the bark, his famous tail swung like the rudder of a great ship, steering him straight and true. His not quite so famous knees did whatever it is that dogs' knees do. It was remarkable, and that is why I remarked on it. Oh, if you haven't ever gone scrambling up a horse chestnut tree on the back of a massive whopper of a dog in the middle of the night, you haven't lived, my friends. The air rifled through the hair, the owls and the pipistrelles flurried. And how Polly wished the ride could last forever, but nothing could last forever. Not even school assembly, although it sometimes feels like it. All too soon, the heroes were standing high up on Jake's nest amongst his collection of broken radios, old magazines and paper clips he had found lying in the forest. "What a clever wolf crumble you is, Jake," said Polly, stroking his big soft belly. "You done made your home in exactly the right place to help us investigate that cherry tree." "Woof," said Jake, who didn't really know what was going on. Polly sat on the edge of a branch and looked down. The little cherry tree was a long way below her dangling legs. The goblins were just dark dots in the distance, and Galloping Bill was just a dark dot being hit by cherry stones. Now, Polly was up here. It didn't seem quite so easy. It was far too long a way to jump down into the tree. There was only one thing for it. Polly doubled a long strand of dental floss around a branch. "Be careful," said Alan Taylor solemnly. "Bark," said Jake. "Burp," said a little monk far below. The song had finally ended. And then the night was silent. The moon blinked once, then looked away. Somewhere in the distance, nothing happened. Polly took a deep breath. Then she slid off the branch, gripping the dental floss for her very life. Down she went through the dark, uneasy night, heading for the cherry tree, heading for Runtus. Chapter 12. In the Cherry Tree. Down went Polly into the cherry tree. Down she slid through the dark green leaves, down into the very heart of the tree, where the secrets lay, and suddenly she was scared. What if it really was Runtus? What if she was about to meet an ancient woodland spirit, a spirit with horns on his head and the legs of a goat, and a magic flute so powerful that one note from it could stop the world from turning, or blow up Koala, shaking like a leaf? Polly pushed aside the shaking leaves, and there she saw him. Yes, there he was, sitting astride a branch and swigging from a bottle of Galloping Bill's homemade forest cider. It was Mr. Gum, his big red scruffer of a beard dipped with cherry juice. His hands were as filthy as pups, and his bloodshot eyes were lit up with madness and power. "I knew it," said Polly. "I knew it was you all along. And I bet Galloping Bill isn't nothing but that stinker of a butcher, Billy William III. "It's true," cried Galloping Bill gleefully, poking his dirty face up through the leaves. "I made this costume myself, from a dead horse." "Nay," he boasted, before disappearing into the night once more. "Well, you annoying little frog," said Mr. Gum, turning to Polly with a snarl. "You were right about Billy, and you was right about me. Satisfied?" "Not yet," said Polly bravely. "You see, I'm here to get proofers that there isn't no runters after all." And with that, she whipped out the camera and aimed at Mr. Gum's crooked face. But before she could click the shutter, Billy popped his head back up through the leaves, opened his mouth as wide as he could, and swallowed the camera whole. "Ha ha ha ha! Good one, Billy, me old centaur impersonator," laughed Mr. Gum. "Oh, dearie me," he sneered, turning back to Polly. "You got no proof, and you never will. How are them townsfolk going to believe you now, you pathetic flea?" "I got my word," said Polly. "That's what." "Your word," snorted Mr. Gum, laughing so hard that a cherry tree stone out of his nostril. "Your word. It's me them townsfolk listen to these days, so none more little girl. There's a new little girl in town. Me!" "But why?" pleaded Polly. "Why are you doing this terrible thing?" "'Cause I fancies ruling this stupid forest," laughed Mr. Gum, his bloodshot eyes lighting up with terrible greed. So greedy, it was very greedy indeedy. "And not only that, but I'm going to rule the whole stupid town of Lamonic Bibbert too. And rule 'em I will," he roared, so loudly that the branches shook and the leaves trembled, and a load of cider bottles plummeted out of the tree, smashing their glassy way through the night. "Ow!" said Billy from below. "That's right," said Mr. Gum. "I'm going to rule this town. I'm already halfway there, and tomorrow's the big day." "What's so important about tomorrow?" said Polly. Mr. Gum danced on a branch in his hobnail boots, his face half in shadow, half in light, like a swine who didn't know better. "I ain't telling you," he laughed, cracking open another bottle of cider. "Now, get out of me tree, for I kick you out with me fists. Now get out of me tree, for I—" Well, Polly didn't need telling twice. Hastily, she climbed down from the tree and ran off into the night, the goblins crackling coals, chasing her through the darkness. "Nay!" cried Billy as he watched her go. "Nay, nay, 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 nay." "Shut up, Billy," cried Mr. Gum, who wanted nothing more than to snooze the rest of the night away in peace. "You're not actually a real centaur, you idiot." "But I like doing it," laughed Billy. "It's funty." "Nay, nay, 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 nay." "But," went Livermonk. "Nay," went Billy. "Woof," joined in Jake from above. "Woof, woof, woofity woof, woof, woof." "I'm surrounded by idiots," sighed Mr. Gum, shaking his head in despair. "Sometimes I don't know why I even bother. I really don't." Chapter 13. Babies and Rainbows. Oh, how the gingerbread headmaster and his pets rejoiced upon Polly's return. Alan Taylor beamed, Graham the caterpillar purred with pleasure, and Johnny Two Spots danced a new ballet called The Return of Polly in her honour. But Penelope the aphid just sulked in the corner, for secretly, deep down in her aphid heart, she was jealous of Polly's friendship with Alan Taylor. You see, aphids are very jealous creatures, and that is why they are green. "Oh, Alan Taylor," said Polly, "I've been in the cherry tree, and just you guess what." We was right. It wasn't nothing but Mr. Gum's business in there. Plain and simple. Only I didn't get no photo, 'cause Billy William done scoff my camera. And, your pet is doing million more babies. It was true. The pets were squeezing and sneezing. New babies all over the place. And not just the old pets either. Lots of younger ones were at it too, popping them out like gin straws. Remarkable, said Alan Taylor, examining the new scuttlers. They never seem to stop. Come on, Polly, we've lots of new leads to make. But the night's adventures had been too much. Polly had already fallen into a lovely, deep sleep, where there was no cherry tree, and no goblins, and no runtuses trying to rule the town. Just lovely, fluffy clouds which rained strawberry lemonade, and a big fairy tale castle filled with tall, handsome princesses who all looked like Jake with a moustache. When Polly awoke, dawn was breaking overhead. The sun was brushing its shiny blonde hair. The trees were stretching their backs, and the birds were singing their latest hit, Chirp, 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 2010 Maximum Frank Remix. The day was going to be a beauty. A little way off, Alan Taylor sat in the dewy grass, watching his hundreds of pets play and tumble around. He looked so happy sitting there that Polly couldn't help but feel her spirits rise. And talking of spirits, how I do love the forest of this time of day, said a voice at Polly's side. It reminds me of when the world was young and smelled of hope and roses. Polly turned to look, and there, beside her, was the spirit of the rainbow. His honest face sparkled in the dewdrop morning light. Just look at him, filled Polly with marvellous feelings, as she was somehow a forest full of wonderful flowers and streams, and suddenly she knew he had come to teach her lessons and ancient wisdoms or something. Child, said the spirit of the rainbow, though he was no older than she, I remember this forest many hundreds of years ago. It was a wild, carefree place. Can you guess how many chocolate wrappers and other bits of litter there were mucking it up? 6, said Polly. None, came the lad's astonishing answer. None at all. You see, child, the world was full of wonder back then. There were fauns and centaurs. Yes, actual real centaurs. One of them was called Tony, and there were pixies and elves and wood nymphs. And there were transparent sprites with almond-shaped eyes, bathing in every stream. It was excellent. Was there unicorns too, who had always wanted more? Asked Polly, who had always wanted more than anything to find a unicorn and ride it to the moon. No, there were never any unicorns, said the lad. That was just a myth and started when an ice cream cone accidentally got stuck on a pony's head. Oh, said Polly, but she could not stay disappointed for long. Not with the sun dappling through the treetops, and the smell of fresh pine and wooded oak, and the spirit of the rainbow's face, as you remembered those far-off times when things were simple and free. Yes, free, said the spirit of the rainbow. Look at Alan Taylor, child, for this is the lesson I want to share. Polly looked over at the gingerbread headmaster. He was laughing in the grass, pets bouncing up and down on him, caterpillars, ladybirds and aphids. Caterpillars, ladybirds and aphids. Bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. It was tremendous. See how he lets the pets go free, observed the spirit of the rainbow. Yes, said Polly, he loves walking them on their leads, but he's always given them time off to have fun when they needs it. How right he is, said the lad, but there is somewhere in the forest who never lets anyone go free. Yes, shuddered Polly. Mr. Gum? Exactly, said the lad. Mr. Gum is like a cruel pet owner who wants his pets to be tied up all the time. Only Mr. Gum's pets are not caterpillars or insects. They're the townsfolk, finished Polly. He's treating the townsfolk just like he owns them. Yes, child, said the spirit of the rainbow. Sombrely, he is promising everyone there will be free. but really he's just trying to control them. So what I'm saying is, child, is not what is important, said the boy. For words are merely words, and sounds are merely sounds. And once every 100 years, a flower with the face of an angel blooms in a white tower and cries tears of pure love. But enough of these mysteries. Time draws on, and I must away. I've got a swimming lesson at 10:30. But just tell me one thing, said Polly, as the boy got up to go. Was Runtus ever real? Back when the forest was excellent with all them pixies and fairy and spirits, was Runtus there too? For a moment it seemed like the boy would tell her. His mouth opened, but then he seemed to think better of it. I must away, he said, disappearing into the dazzling sunshine. And where he had sat were 3 fruit trees. One said, yes. One said, no. And one said, maybe. Chapter 14. Precious things. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. The sun was climbing higher through the treetops as one boy, one of the townsfolk, returned to the clearing. Old Granny, Jonathan Ripples, Martin Laundrette, the Pamellas, the other Pamela, who no one liked, Crazy Barry Fungus, and many other besides. And they all had one thing in common. They all had faces, and they all had another thing in common. Each and every one of them was carrying a gift for great Runtus. Jonathan Ripples was carrying a photo of himself as a young man, thin and handsome like a film star, all those years before the hunger had got him. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. Martin Laundrette had brought the toy washing machine he'd played with as a child. He'd loved to fill it with toy shirts and toy trousers and toy washing powder that was actually sherbet. And it was that toy washing machine that had made him want to open a laundrette when he grew up. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. Beanie McLeany, who loved things that rhymed, had brought all his favourite things of all, a stuffed raccoon, a tablespoon, and a blue balloon. Runtus, Runtus, Runtus. Friday O'Leary had brought a photo taken on his wedding day. The photo was actually of a doorknob factory in Liverpool, but never mind, it had been taken on his wedding day, and that was the important thing. I don't get it, said Alan Taylor, from where he and Polly lay hidden behind a tulip, the pets grazing at their side. This stuff's just worthless junk. What on earth can Mr. Gunn want with it? I dunno, said Polly slowly. I thought he was after their riches. But she looked at the townsfolk again, seeing the dreamy way they gazed at their precious things, seeing the careful ways they held them. Suddenly she understood it all, and a chill went up her spine, and a caterpillar went down her sock. That's it, cried Polly. There are precious things, Atie. They're precious in the hearts of the townsfolk. They're the things what gives them hope and reminds them of happier times. You're right, exclaimed Alan Taylor. By ginger, you're right, Polly. And if they gives them up, it's like they've given up a part of themselves, continued Polly. It's game over, and Mr. Gunn will have total control of them all, just like he'd done planned. They'll be at his command forever. Oh, Polly cried, Alan Taylor, he's not just taking their precious things. It's like he's stealing their very souls. Polly gritted her teeth. Well, he hasn't got 'em yet, she said, determinedly. We got to stop him before it's too late. It's no use stopping him after it's too late, 'cause it'll be too late. Well, come on then, said Alan Taylor gallantly. Tally-ho, pets, tally-ho! And so they followed the crowd into the clearing, brave Polly and little Alan Taylor, and his hundreds of pets all rearing up before him like a vast, moving sea of blue and yellow-green. Runtus! 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 The townsfolk encircled the tree, waving their precious things. Runtus! 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 Oh, great Runtus, we have brought you our precious gifts, just as you asked. for you are a mighty leader, and—" "Oi, townsfolk!" shouted Polly, racing into the mist. "Shut up with all your runtusses and listen, 'cause I got news so astounding that your minds is going to explode out your faces and your legs is going to melt with astonishment. In your arms is going to fly out their sockets and land on a nearby hill." "You'd better tell us then," said David Casserole, the mayor. "That sounds absolutely horrible." "No, you gots to know," said Polly, "'cause you all been taken for fools by that cherry tree. 'Cause now I know for sure it isn't no runtus up in them leaves. No, it's Mr. Gum. I seen him myself, hiding there like a dirty great maggot with a hat on." "What?" murmured the crowd. "Not runtus? Murmur, 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 debate, murmur, murmur." "Hang on," demanded Martin Laundrette, suddenly turning to Polly. "Why should we take your word for it?" "Yes," cried Jonathan Ripples. "Where's your proof?" "I haven't got none," admitted Polly. "Unfortunately, my camera was eaten by a pretend centaur." "But no buts," declared Mayor Casserole. "It's runtus we like, and it's runtus we came to see. Sorry, Polly, but they're always back, and they're here to stay." Chapter 15. Runtus and the Pets. Runtus, runtus, runtus! The noise was deafening. It was so awful that the bluebells pressed their emergency rewind buttons and shot back underground. It was so horrible that the weeping willows wept real tears. It was so unbearable that the elm trees emigrated to other countries. "Runtus, runtus, runtus!" chanted the crowd. And then there came the most almighty cheer as Galloping Bill stepped out from the bushes, the gang of grinning goblins at his side. "Nay, nay," said Galloping Bill, pawing at the morning air like he imagined a real centaur might do. "Now, I know you all come here to see your favourite wooden spirit. Am I right?" "Yes," yelled the crowd. "Nay, meow." "Why do you want to see?" shouted Galloping Bill in his centaurist voice. "Runtus," yelled the crowd. "Well then, you're in luck," cried Galloping Bill, accidentally punching himself in the face with excitement, "'cause here comes the bloke what you loves to obey. The one that's important. Commands to say. The one that's going to change your lives today. It's the one, the only, Runtus! Nay! Yeah! Shouted the voice in the cherry tree as the crowd roared. "That's right, me old devoted followers, it's me. Now you all got your precious gifts to show how much you love me." "Yeah!" shouted the crowd. "Good. Now here's how it's gonna work. You got to go over to Galloping Bill and give him your precious gifts. It's as simple as A.B. Runtus. So, who's gonna go first?" "Old Granny should go first," shouted someone. "She's the one who led us here." "Yes, Old Granny should go first," shouted someone else. "Yes, Old Granny," shouted someone else. "I don't think Old Granny should go first."